What's up, everyone? Welcome into another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks videos, this time for Tuesday, December 21st. I'm your host, Justin Bales, and we have a reasonable five-game slate at the moment. It seems as if the postponed games have kind of already happened, and we hopefully won't be getting any more kind of major postponed announcements. Um, just realized this is a very festive video. I am indeed wearing the Christmas sweater. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's a pretty sweet dinosaur, kind of outlined as a Christmas tree. You can't see that far down the sweater. Trust me, one of the best Christmas sweaters I have ever seen in my life. I own it personally. Also, just realized that these lights are on behind me, and now that I broke the thing, I'm not sure. There we go to turn them off. My fiance was doing a video in here prior to me. She left the lights on. I didn't even realize it until we started up on here. But I did want to see, is a Christmas sweater a normal thing? Do people actually do that? I know it's normal in terms of a lot of people talk about Christmas sweaters and stuff. And when you have like the ugly Christmas sweater contests at like school, elementary school, high school, middle school, that kind of thing. Do people still do that in their actual lives? Because threw this bad boy on, just kind of wondering if other people actually do that type of thing, or if it just so happens that I now have a Christmas sweater that I'm going to have to wear every time I see my family for the holidays. That quite the intro, though. Had nothing to do with basketball, but we do have a five-game slate. Don't get me wrong. Ridiculous amount of injury news, as has been the case essentially every game. Before we get into that, if you enjoy this video, go ahead, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and you can comment anything that you want below, whether it be about Christmas sweaters. I'm looking at you, the audience, to let me know your opinions on that, or about the actual NBA slate. You can comment any players, anything you want like that. I will answer any questions you have throughout the day. But I think we can get down to business here. The Detroit Pistons versus New York Knicks were kind of in a weird spot. So for the Knicks, Kevin Knox, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, Quentin Grimes, and Miles McBride all ruled out. Derrick Rose is currently questionable. The thing for them, though, is that they have now signed Damian Dotson and Matt Mooney to 10-day contracts, and it looks like Kemba Walker is back in the rotation. So kind of need to wait for the Derrick Rose news. But Kemba Walker probably locked into those bigger minutes now. And obviously, they have more guys just to fill out the rotation, which, quick taking a little side trick here. This seems to be what the NBA is going with, where they're allowing them to basically expand their rosters more or less. And that way, when people get COVID, they get placed on the COVID list, they can't play. They're going to have more or less expanded rosters. They don't need to postpone games. It's going to be a weird season. It already has been a weird season. It's not going to change. It's essentially going to be weird from here on out. I assumed that they were going to take a 2-week break or something after Christmas. Obviously they want that Christmas cash for having the Lakers and other teams play, but I did assume that they would take some type of break. I know the NHL just postponed, I believe, all games for like the next 5 days or something, or they're doing it at some point. I don't know. I'm not a hockey guy. I just got a message on my phone that said that they were going to be postponing essentially the entire league slates for a certain amount of days or something. Would have assumed that the NBA was doing that, but they're going with, I believe, the expanded rosters more or less. And I guess we're going to see how that works for the time being. Continuing injury news. Caleb Martin, PJ Tucker, Markieff Morris, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo all out for Miami. Tyler Hero is questionable. And then on the other side, Malcolm Brogdon is off the injury report. He's completely fine at this point. Damian Lillard, questionable for Portland. Cody Zeller and CJ McCollum will continue to miss time for them. On the other side, New Orleans is relatively okay. Then you have Minnesota, Dallas, which is just a crazy game in terms of the injury type stuff that's going down here. Taurean Prince, Anthony Edwards, Patrick Beverly, Josh Okogie, Jared Vanderbilt, all already ruled out and will miss at least 2 more games for the Minnesota Wolves. On the other side, Willie Cauley-Stein, Josh Green, Luka Doncic, Maxi Kleber, Reggie Bullock, all out for Dallas. And then Kristaps Porzingis is questionable tonight. Both of those teams have signed players to essentially 10-year or not 10-year, 10-day or 2-way contracts. So they should be fine to play this game, even though both are really getting decimated right now in terms of their actual rotation. So that's kind of something that we kind of need to sift through. For Phoenix, Los Angeles, Abdel Nader out for Phoenix. Chris Paul looks like he's going to play. For LA, no Malik Monk, no Austin Reeves, Taylor Horton Tucker, Dwight Howard, Avery Bradley, Kent Bazemore. All of them are out. LeBron James is probable. Trevor Ariza also probable for this game. That about does it for injury news. Only 5 games, but so much to go over. As we get into the actual slate for tonight and the 5 games, I do want to mention that I'm kind of going to have a concise pool, which has been the case in recent days that I've been doing for this. So if you do have questions on anyone that I didn't talk about, go ahead and just drop their name in the comments, ask anything that you want. You can also get into our Discord where we're monitoring the injury news throughout the day, kind of keeping watch on that, who's going to benefit, all that good stuff. Chatdfs.com, completely free. DFSkarma.com is the website. If you're more into sports betting, betkarma.com, that's where you can find all of that good stuff. But at dfskarma.com, we do have free articles along with our projections. You can grab a core plays package. That's how you get the projections. You also get premium content with that. You get our actual core plays, and you get into the premium Discord channels, which you don't need to pay anything to get into the free Discord channels. The premium ones do come with the package, though. Both of them are where we kind of discuss everything that's happening. The premium channels are where we sit more closer to lock to kind of go over any questions that you guys really have that you're asking up until the slate. As we start at point guard, you have the Los Angeles guys priced up pretty high. I think that's appropriate. I think LeBron James is the better of the two. I don't necessarily know if that's where I'm going to go, but I do think that he's at least viable, especially because he has point guard, small forward eligibility. So one of the key things to that is that he can play literally every position outside of center. And I don't mean like he can also play power forward. Obviously he can't, but he's guard or forward eligible. So you have him point guard, small forward, guard, forward, or utility. Just gives a lot of different ways that you can get him into your lineup. In terms of the high-priced guards that I really like, I think that Damian Lillard, assuming that he's playing, is probably the top option. He gets a plus matchup against New Orleans. I do think that he's very viable at the current price tag, under 10,000. I know he hasn't really been enjoying that good of a season, but only 2 games ago, he posted almost 65 fantasy points. He's obviously taking on a very large role without CJ McCollum in the lineup. So I do believe that that's at least an interesting spot that you can kind of take note of. As you continue down a bit, I guess the guy that, more or less sticks out at this point would probably be Deangelo Russell. Minnesota is without Anthony Edwards, obviously, who is a large part of the offense that opens up shots. They're without Patrick Beverley, who more or less takes up quite a bit of the guard minutes. Deangelo Russell should be locked into major minutes. He should see plenty of shot attempts. He gets the matchup against Dallas. I'm not overly concerned whatsoever with that type of a matchup. So I do think that he's a very viable option, essentially because not necessarily that he's underpriced, but he isn't really priced more towards his ceiling. I guess you could make the argument that he's better in tournaments than cash games, but it kind of is what it is. Moving down even farther, I think if Derrick Rose is ruled out, you're probably just going Kemba Walker. 37 minutes in his last game. Obviously, throughout the season, he's flashed in terms of fantasy. It's just that Kemba Walker isn't that good of a real-life player anymore, so they had to get him out of the rotation. In his return, though, 37 minutes, 43 fantasy points, only 5,200. He didn't really get a price bump or anything, so pretty clear cut that you can use him essentially in all leagues, assuming Derrick Rose is indeed out. If Rose is playing, I still think that you can use Walker just because the New York offense is more or less decimated by COVID, but he does become riskier, and I probably don't use him in cash games at that point. Down under 4K, Trey Burke, really good option. Minutes are a bit inconsistent, but the upside is there. Even if he only gets 15 to 20 minutes, the upside is still there if his shot's falling, especially just with so many injuries. And if Porzingis is out, that could open up a few more extra shots here for someone like Burke as well. Super risky, But at only 3,900, I mean, the upside is just fantastic for what you could potentially get out of him. At shooting guard, I think you can go all the way up to the top. Brandon Ingram's been playing really well recently. He gets a good matchup against the Portland Blazers. I don't like their defense. I think that Ingram has the potential to really take this game over. And if you wanted to go with a very specific type of pairing, in terms of pure upside, you could match Damian Lillard and Brandon Ingram. Both have the ability to take the game over for their respective offenses. If that's the case, they start going back and forth. All of a sudden, the ceiling has been raised quite a bit. I do think that that is a viable strategy on this type of a slate. Jalen Brunson is now up to 7,400. No longer does he really sit at the must play, but if Kristaps Porzingis is out, he's literally the focal point of the offense. So I think that that's a pretty easy plug and play. Even if Porzingis does play in this game, Brunson's locked into like nearly 40 minutes. I think he's played 38 and 39 in his last two games. So plenty of upside and a plus matchup against Minnesota. I think that's more or less, an easy play at this point. He's probably really one of the better mid to high priced players. He's not necessarily as high as some of the other guys. Like it's kind of odd, I guess, that he has been playing and at least flashed, but like Karis LeVert being higher priced than Jalen Brunson at this point seems a little weird. But it kind of, that's been what DraftKings has done. There's just specific players that they've really struggled to bump the prices up. One of them would be someone like Evan Fournier. 5,100 obviously just makes a really good option in terms of the pure volume that he's going to be playing. 43 minutes in his last game, he took 24 shot attempts. If Derrick Rose is out once again, shots are going to be there to go around. Fournier is a guy that has no problem shooting the ball. He does come with plenty of scoring potential, and again, only 5,100. Right below him, probably the top option in this price range would be Malik Beasley. Again, just a few players are out for Minnesota. You have Anthony Edwards and Patrick Beverley as the two major ones. That'll lock Malik Beasley essentially into 30 plus minutes, most likely. And he's really played well when given the time this season. Not to mention, gets the matchup against Dallas, which obviously we like, and he's under 5,000. So not going to be overly difficult really to get him into your lineups or anything like that. So I do think that Beasley is one of the better plays on the slate, especially because, he is so cheap still at this point. As you move to small forward, we have some guys that I've already talked about up at the top. I think that they're viable, that obviously being LeBron James and Brandon Ingram. As you move down a bit more, though, we're kind of in, I don't necessarily want to say a dead zone, but there's not all that many people I like. I think Josh Hart's viable, but I probably drop down to Evan Fournier. Again, that kind of depends on whether or not Derrick Rose is playing. If Rose is out, Fournier makes a really good option. I probably just drop down to him. If Derrick Rose is in, I think there's more of an argument to be made for Josh Hart in that situation. And then I do think that you can drop down to someone like Nasir Little, locked into big minutes. He's coming off of two really big games, only 4,200. Former first round pick, hasn't really put it all together in the NBA, but he does have the ability to contribute at some level in each of the five categories. Not necessarily elite, I guess, at steals, more or less, blocks. He has flashed a little bit in recent games. Not always up there. Assists, he recently had 6 against the Charlotte Hornets. Wouldn't bank on that type of a thing either. He generally sits down, or I guess generally sits more down around 3 or fewer. Can add the points and rebounds to some extent, though. It's not like he's going to go out and get you 25 real life points. He just doesn't need to for only 4,200, at small forward, which really isn't an overly good position on the slate anyway. Moving to power forward, I think the top guy for me specifically would be Kristaps Porzingis. Really depends if he's able to play or not. He's currently questionable. If he's in, he only played 23 minutes against Minnesota in his last game. He scored 22 fantasy points. I think that he has plenty more upside than that. If you want to go above him to either Domantas Sabonis, who really He doesn't necessarily look bad, but it seems pretty clear that Sabonis does want out of Indiana, and he's not truly at this point consistently trying to play his way out. Where some players want to show off their value, so they really go and dominate. It doesn't really seem to be the case for Sabonis or Julius Randle. I'm fine with him, but both of them have actually struggled a bit in recent games. I understand the pure upside. But not necessarily my favorite plays on this type of a slate. I do think that there are more or less some better options as you move down. Someone like Larry Nance Jr. is playing bigger minutes. We obviously know the pure upside that he has. Jay Crowder gets the matchup against Los Angeles, and his minutes have been inconsistent, along with his fantasy production. Obviously, that tends to tie into minutes, but he does come with plenty of upside for 4,500. The big thing I think that you probably look at, and this is a little tough because it's there's still risky options. It's just they're so cheap and they're going to get minutes. Jared Vanderbilt's already been ruled out for Minnesota, which means that Jaden McDaniels probably jumps back into minutes in the high 20s, maybe low 30s. It's just that he doesn't always produce in terms of fantasy, even when given that time. So I do think that McDaniels is in play. I also think that Naz Reid is in play because he should get a few extra minutes here. Neither one of them seem overly safe at this point in time, though, and that's kind of more or less an issue, really. But with Vanderbilt out, I do think that both should see an increase in minutes and at least make viable options. As you move to center, if you're going to go to the top of it, Karl Anthony Towns is the best option. He gets a matchup against Dallas, who really struggles against centers. Didn't necessarily dominate in their first game, but he did flash versatility. He only took 15 shots. Obviously, that's not including, he had 13 free throws, but 15 shot attempts for 24 points in 34 minutes. He wasn't necessarily needed as much as some nights he is, I guess would be the way to put it. And with Anthony Edwards out, again, them dealing with some other stuff, and obviously the matchup just being great, the upside for Towns is roughly as high as the majority of players on the slate. Moving down through who you want to really consider on the slate, I think there are a few viable options, none standing out all that much. I do think that Yusuf Nurkic at 6,900 is great in terms of tournaments, not nearly safe enough for cash games. He does get a plus matchup against New Orleans, though, who have struggled at times against the center. Isaiah Stewart, also very interesting. 30 minutes in his last game. He does come with quite a bit of upside, gets a solid matchup against New York. The minutes have been inconsistent, though, and that is somewhat of a problem. He's really produced well recently, though, and he's only 5,100, which is a bit shocking. So I do think that he's one of the better options. I'm just not sure if at this point I necessarily put him on the cash game train. And then if you want to go all the way down to 4,200, you do have Herbert Jones, who coming off of a near 40 fantasy point performance. Don't expect that. He generally doesn't really dominate like that, but the pure upside again is there, and he does get a good matchup against Portland. Should see 30 plus minutes once again, which has been the case quite a bit often. And he will dud, and I mean completely dud, like a 10 fantasy points type of dud in 30 minutes. But it doesn't happen nearly as often as he at least flashes, especially for his price tag in that time. So I do think that Herbert Jones is an interesting option. That about does it. That's quite a few options to go through, but thank you for watching. I do enjoy all the comments that you guys send. Thankful for everyone that does watch, that gives it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and do that and subscribes to the channel, because obviously that means we're doing things right and going up. But thank you to everyone that's watching. We should be back. I believe Spike will be on it with me tomorrow night for Wednesday's slate. But good luck tonight. Hopefully everyone wins some cash.